we have missed the point on global heating. What matters is what's happening to the heat engine, and strategic policies geared to observation of current effects are strategically disastrous in engaging with the system's behaviour. Oh, and by the way, just to complete the picture, there's another feedback cluster hiding here. The hotter it gets, the less inert the system is, and the faster it gets hotter. That one's only been in the understanding of our science domain for the last few months. So there we are, and we can put in that final feedback cluster. Now that encapsulates the feedback and driver system of the global climate behaviour. So, let's summarise. Most of the systems known to affect climate change are now in net positive feedback. Each feedback mechanism accelerates its own specific process. But as a whole, this complex adaptive feedback system consists of an interactive set of mutually reinforcing subsystems. Isn't that wonderful? What it means is this, that the output from one feedback changes the temperature a bit faster. That feeds into all the other feedbacks, so they reinforce each other. That's an unstable system. It can move very quickly indeed. It's what we call a second-order feedback system. I remember presenting this material for the first time, to the European Environment Agency in Copenhagen, February 2006, I think it was. And Jackie McGlade, the director of the agency, and I were talking afterwards, and I said, I don't think we're going to see this second-order feedback system operating for a long time because temperature rises very slowly. She said, David, this is a complex adaptive system with feedback on feedback. This can go very quickly indeed. Jackie is one of the members of the Resilience Alliance that looks at exactly this stuff at a high level of mathematical precision. There are only a very few mathematicians in there able to do this kind of work. She's one. So I went, and I changed my presentation. Anyway, you asked me to be radical and say how it is, so here's how it is. Evidence for that from Dennis Bushnell, who, in parallel, of course, with James Hansen, Dennis Bushnell is chief scientist at the Langley Research Centre of NASA. In his email of the 12th of January last year, reported on the phenomenon that were being observed across the world. And he said, warming is accelerating greatly, and especially recently. Oh, and that was before the anomaly of 2007, the massive loss of ice from the polar area. So the evidence of acceleration is already in the public domain. That moves us on not just to dealing with the effects of acceleration, but moving towards what we call a tipping point, where things really run out of control. Not just smooth acceleration, but behaviours that go unstable. So here we introduce the work of James Hansen from the Goddard Institute. Again, same sort of date from James' publication. The Earth's climate, remarkably sensitive to global forces. Positive feedback, accelerating feedbacks predominate. And that allows the whole planet to be whipsawed between states. It's what we call a metastable system. Small pushes lead to big movements. Recent greenhouse gas emissions place the Earth perilously close to dramatic climate change that could run out of our control. Great dangers for humans and other creatures and the whole life support system of planet Earth. You see, we really do have a problem. So we're going to look at this issue of tipping points, and this takes us into the next station, beyond the tipping point. There have been 5 major extinction events in the geological history of the Earth caused by massive volcanic eruptions or huge lava flow, or in 1 or 2 cases possibly, major asteroidal impact. And it's interesting here in Taellberg, as we sit on this hilltop, which is part of the frozen shockwave stabilized in granite from that great impact of a meteor, the crater of which forms the basin of the lake, whose beauty we admire on a daily basis. This was a local extinction event, believe me. But the major ones in Earth's history have meant shock jumps in carbon dioxide, and that pushes the system away from equilibrium and into very rapid change. Typically, they have wiped out 80, 85, 90, 95% of life on the planet. It takes many, many thousands of years for the geochemistry to recover, and several millions of years for the biological species to recover any sense of niche filling. What's a tipping point? Well, here's a lovely illustration from Brian Walker of the Resilience Alliance from Australia, a tipping point of bifurcation, and it's illustrated by a basin of familiar behavior which varies a bit, but it's held by this containing area here. And the behavior of the climate can move around within that container. As the positive feedbacks build up, they can push that behavior over the watershed and down into another basin, a hotter Earth scenario, in which it's very difficult to recover back into the stability of the previous one. That's a tipping point. See how this goes. By the way, what I'm going to do next, actually, is take a line from about here, up over the watershed and down into the next basin. You got the idea? So that's going to be a cross-section through there. It's much easier to work with. It's like the watershed between two valleys. You come up the path, over the top, and down into the next valley. Here it is. The original stable state equilibrium, the inflection point where positive feedbacks begin to have an effect on the containment, the unstable equilibrium where positive feedbacks and the containing, damping feedbacks just balance out, and then beyond that, the accelerating feedbacks push the system towards runaway change. Contained runaway, but it, for our purposes, in human-like terms, it's runaway. Onto that, I want to introduce the concept of the critical threshold. Critical threshold is a point beyond which the power of the accelerating feedback overwhelms the human power to intervene and restore the system to equilibrium. There's a limit beyond which we dare not go. Oh, in terms of costs, of course, and the energy required to make the difference, it's the point towards which the cost of restabilizing the climate doesn't just go on increasing or going up slowly, as in the assumptions behind the Stern report. It goes up vertically to infinity. Beyond that, it would cost the Earth and still not restore the system to equilibrium. Let's illustrate. Along the bottom axis, the power of positive feedback relative to what we can do about it. So in the early stages, easy to restore the system to equilibrium. Feedback builds up, more difficult. Feedback reaches the critical threshold here, just on the limit of everything we can do. Beyond that, nothing we can do. It costs the Earth. Costs up that axis. And this is what I mean by asymptotic increase as we reach the critical threshold. The costs escalate to infinity as that threshold. That's the point of no return. If we superimpose the two graphs, if we bring the equilibrium graph and the critical threshold into the same diagram, it looks like this. We are fairly confident that we've passed the unstable equilibrium and are somewhere on the downslope. The critical threshold beyond which we have no hope whatsoever of pushing the system back into stability lies somewhere, we hope, ahead of us. Costs escalating rapidly of making the intervention that is needed. And we've delayed 15 years already to make that intervention.